I feel like architecture as a profession lacks a little bit of self-awareness. At best, architects are able to reach out to designers and people that are already interested in architecture, maybe even artists. I mean, the most popular way of presenting architecture is like a MTV Cribs style tour of upper class housing. And at worst, architecture is presented as confusing and hard to understand. And so I'm going to try to fix this by doing what I do best, which is struggle to take myself seriously. What is a town hall then? Many would say a meeting place for local representatives as well as administration. Historians would say probably something like, it's an evolution of a market hall. In my hometown, Oslo, the town hall houses the district political admin and the mayor's office. The town hall also is a representation of the city's history and culture and ambition. But hidden between the lines, one can see many hidden references of a historical architectural culture, which I feel is maybe a little bit underappreciated by the city's residents. Before we get to these hidden references, I think it's helpful to know generally more about cities and how they become. And so with a lot of help from literature, we're going to find out what the hell a city really is. So let's ask again, what the hell is a city? According to Spiro Kostof, what a city is depends on the lens that you're seeing it from, obviously. You might be a social anthropologist, a sociologist, an urbanist, maybe a historian, or maybe an archaeologist. And these people always end up creating many ways to categorize cities, such as type or region. For example, the Middle Eastern cities or North American cities, Eastern European, I don't know, something like that. Maybe you can categorize by size or maybe other self-defined types. Many like to talk about city evolution through time. And so the categories would be something like modernism, medieval, Hellenic, ancient and Neolithic. One way I attempted to categorize it was by starting with what everyone seems to agree with were the first cities in recorded history, which were the Sumerian civilization in ancient Mesopotamia. After that, the Egyptian cities, then classical Greece and the polis, further the Roman urbs, then cities from the Middle Ages, the Renaissance, colonial cities, etc. One can also take specific cities and use them as case studies and see their evolutions from a small town to a big city. One can define them by shape and function, if you like, such as trade and warfare, or maybe in the way the city grew, like if it was slow and organic or rapid and through planned districts. You get the point. Only the imagination is the limit of how you can describe a city. So yeah, how do we start then? Well, Kostof had some premises that he thinks are universal. Quote, I think we can agree on some simple premises about cities, regardless of their origin, their birthplace, their form, their makers. Two sensible definitions. According to L. Worth, a city is, quote, a relatively large, dense and permanent settlement of socially
heterogeneous
individuals. For Mumford, a city is a, quote, point of maximum concentration of the power and culture of a community, end quote. Then Kostof gives us a checklist of 9 points. All of them aren't 100% relevant to town halls exactly, so I'm just going to explain them relatively quickly. Maybe I'll make a video about the other points in more detail later. I'm going to use Oslo as the example, as this is currently where I'm living. First point, quote, cities are places where a certain energized crowding of people takes place, end quote. I think he's referring to density. So I went out and filmed energized crowding of people. This is Jernbanetorget, Rådhusplassen, Grønland. I swear you guys, usually it's a lot more energized, but it's literally the worst time to film an energized crowding of people, so yeah. Number 2. Cities come in clusters. A town never exists unaccompanied by other towns. It is therefore inevitably locked in an urban system, an urban hierarchy, end quote. So you know when you make waffles, right? And you mix the dry ingredients with the wet ones, and you don't mix it properly, you get a clumpy mix. A city is like a clumpy waffle mix, or maybe a clumpy strawberry jam. Also, if you combine these with sour cream, you get essentially vafler. For real though. In the 50s to the 70s, Oslo expanded rapidly through satellite towns, even though I think his definition of clusters is more of an umbrella term, but anyway, one can think of satellite towns as being the clumps in the waffle batter. The municipality and the property developers were like, let's use the scientific method to do our designs and develop the perfect, most humane housing in the universe. Alright then, in order to keep an eye on the naughty kids, they put a window in the kitchen so that the mother can cook and watch the kids at the same time. I mean, look at these kids. I found photos of baby boomers from the 60s in these neighborhoods, and it looks pretty grim. Like, are you okay? Like, how old are you? Is this your baby? For real? It actually looks like you need therapy. No wonder you guys ruined the economy. Also, it's probably practical to have the toilet and the washing machine actually available within the apartment. So I need you all to imagine one thing. Only a generation ago, it wasn't unusual for risers in old Norwegian apartment blocks to share one toilet. Yeah. To be honest, things haven't really improved that much. I mean, I've seen apartments for 6 people sharing one toilet. But I digress. The very first satellite town was Lambertseter, and then was quickly followed by Manglerud, Oppsal, Skøyen, Bøler in the boroughs of Østensjø, then Veitvet, Ammerud. And just to pause here for a second, I think many of these projects have so much value, visually and symbolically, but I have to say that Ammerud is my favorite. I mean, look how cool it is. Along with Romsås and Stovner, are pretty well known in Oslo, and they're all located northeast of Oslo's city centre. Other satellite towns include You get the point. There were so many, and by today I think the map probably looks something like this. Of course, in the 60s there was a massive boom that would put these ideals and structures to a halt. The boom babies. Oh, and also oil. And then privatize everything, and now it's chic to hate on modernism, but that's architectural history for another time. Number 3, quote, cities are places that have some physical circumscription, whether material or symbolic, to separate those who belong in the urban order from those who do not, end quote. I would say Oslo's circumscription is the municipal border, which is basically all of the boroughs combined. In this case, I suppose that's like a legal border, which makes it symbolic, I think. I mean, there isn't a barrier physically in the way. And at the end of the day, laws are just social constructs that help society stay somewhat organized, safe and functioning. You know, the Leviathan and Thomas Hobbes and that. Whatever, let's move on. Number 4. Quote, cities are places where there is a specialized differentiation of work, where people are priests or craftsmen or soldiers, and where wealth is not equally distributed among its citizens. We were just lucky that we had the Labour Party in Parliament when we discovered oil, and they didn't waste the potential. Don't quote me on that, as to be honest, I didn't research Norwegian political history related to oil, so it's just an assumption. I mean, I suppose we're left if you compare us to the UK or the USA, and that becomes clear when I show you this map. Traditionally, people would say that this map somewhat represents the class borders in Oslo. The west would be associated with the upper classes, and then the east and south would be associated with the working class and immigrants. And when I talk to people from the northern areas of town, they swear they aren't part of the east and west beef. So I guess that puts them as middle class or something. And then the city centre would be similarly divided by the river into east and west. I mean, I would say that this is outdated now and looks in reality more like this. Due to gentrification, the lower classes that were usually associated with the industry near the river are now being pushed out of the city centre. If we zoom in, it looks something like this. There are some pockets of immigrant classes and working class people still around, and it just seems to me that most lower class people are either moving further away from the city or living in upper class areas as tenants. This is just how I perceive the patterns in which Oslo is developing. And no, I'm not going to comment on the variation of labour. We're not all working the same jobs in Oslo, mate, come on. The reason that at this point I lower the tone of my voice is because at the time of recording my flatmates had gone to bed and I couldn't be asked to record the day after. Also, if you want to keep exploring the class borders in Oslo, or any city really, I suggest you check out hoodmaps.com. It's actually quite fun, especially at 4 in the morning when you're still struggling to sleep. Oh yeah, and by the way, the infamous 1%, they live by the water's edge, as this gives them easy access to boat parking. Which leads me to my next point in the list. Number 5. Quote, cities are places favored by a source of income, trade, intensive agriculture, the possibility of surplus food, a physical resource like metal, or a spring, a natural harbor, or even a king. It might be easy to miss, but if you look really closely, Oslo is 100% a natural harbor, which is great because then we can do maritime trade and stuff. I'm pretty sure we can't fish though because of pollution. Continuing, I would even say that access to fresh water is a natural resource too, as in fact Norwegians do die if we don't drink soft. Not too far inland, there are actual microscopic amounts of farmable areas, which is enough to supply Oslo at least, so we're good on that front. Oh yeah, and we also got a king. I'm not really sure how that's a resource. Tourism, maybe? So before this video ends, I just have to say that it has taken so long to make this video. Shit. I realize now that I have to split it in 2 parts, and when the second part is coming, I have no idea. If you think the sound quality is a little bit spastic, it's because I've used 3 microphones. In fact, one of the reasons that this video took so long to make, it's because as soon as I took a step forward, I felt like everything I'd done to that point needed to be improved. And then it continued like that until now that I find it embarrassing to keep pushing the release date. Also, I'm going to make videos about other things too, as I need to practice talking to a microphone and being in front of a camera. I will try to improve script making as well and experiment with different types of content, so yeah. Why am I recording?